Welcome. The Osage had oil, the richest oil deposit in American history, sitting right under their land, and white men wanted it. So they did something extraordinary. They didn't just steal it. They built a system, legal and deliberate, to murder the Osage out of their own inheritance. One family at a time. This is how they did it, and how one FBI agent tried to stop them. To understand what happened to the Osage, you have to understand what they had. In the late 1800s, the Osage were forcibly relocated from their ancestral lands to a rocky, seemingly worthless reservation in northeastern Oklahoma. It was land nobody wanted, which turned out to be the point. Beneath that worthless rock lay one of the largest oil deposits in American history. By the 1920s, the Osage were receiving oil royalties that made them extraordinarily wealthy. They built grand homes. They sent their children to the finest schools. They wore jewelry and furs and hosted lavish parties. The American press called them the most affluent people on earth. But the United States government, in its paternalistic wisdom, decided the Osage couldn't be trusted to manage their own money. So they created a system of white guardians, appointed by courts to control Osage finances. In practice, this meant wealthy white men controlling everything the Osage owned. It was called the guardian system. It was legalized theft. Then the Osage started dying. Molly Burkhart watched her family disappear around her. Her sister Anna was found shot in a ravine. Her mother died slowly, mysteriously, from a wasting illness nobody could explain. Her sister Rita was killed along with her husband and a houseguest when their home was blown up in the middle of the night. The deaths were ruled accidents, suicides, natural causes. The local authorities weren't investigating, they were complicit. Because here's what Grann uncovers. If an Osage person died without a will, their head right, their share of the oil royalties, passed to their white spouse or white guardian. The killings weren't random, they were systematic, targeted. A calculated campaign to transfer Osage wealth into white hands. And at the center of it all was one man, William Hale Cattleman, respected community pillar, and the architect of what investigators would later call the Reign of Terror. Hale had married members of his own family into the Osage community, including his nephew Ernest Burkhart, who married Molly. Then he began quietly eliminating everyone who stood between them and the Osage inheritance. By the time the newly formed Bureau of Investigation got involved, dozens of Osage had died under suspicious circumstances. J. Edgar Hoover, ambitious and image-obsessed, saw the case as an opportunity. He sent a young agent named Tom White, a former Texas Ranger, quiet and methodical, to crack it. White went undercover. He planted informants. He slowly, painstakingly built a case against Hale and his network in a community where everyone was either complicit or terrified into silence. What he found was staggering. The conspiracy went deeper than anyone imagined. Murders for hire, poisonings, staged accidents, a network of killers operating openly because they knew the local system protected them. The trial of William Hale became a national sensation. And when he was finally convicted, Hoover took all the credit, turning the case into the founding myth of the modern FBI. But here's where Grann's book becomes something extraordinary. After telling the story of the investigation, he keeps going. He digs into the archives himself, and what he finds is devastating. The murders didn't stop with the ones the FBI investigated. Grann discovers evidence of dozens more Osage deaths. Suspicious, uninvestigated, buried in records nobody had looked at in decades. The true scale of the killing was far larger than the official story ever acknowledged. And the FBI's heroic narrative? Complicated. White was genuinely decent, but Hoover's bureau also cut deals with witnesses, downplayed evidence, and shaped the story to serve its own institutional interests. Justice was partial, incomplete, selective. The Osage got some convictions. They did not get the full truth. Molly Burkhart survived. She eventually divorced Ernest after learning the full extent of his involvement in her family's murders. She lived until 1937, watching the oil wealth slowly dry up, the grand houses fall into disrepair, the community she'd known hollowed out by decades of systematic theft and killing. The Osage Nation still exists, still meets, still fights for recognition of what was done to them. Grann ends the book at an Osage memorial. Names carved in stone, families gathering, the dead finally acknowledged, if not fully avenged. What happened to the Osage wasn't a crime story, it was a policy. Backed by courts, enabled by guardians, ignored by authorities, and buried for a century under a more comfortable American narrative, Killers of the Flower Moon forces you to look at it directly. David Grann spent years on this investigation. He interviewed Osage descendants, dug through FBI archives, and uncovered murders that had never been publicly acknowledged. The book won the Edgar Award and became a finalist for the National Book Award. In 2023, Martin Scorsese adapted it into a film starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, and the Osage Nation was involved in every step of production. But read the book first, because Grann gives you something the film can't: the full scope of the conspiracy, the archival discoveries, and the quiet, devastating reckoning at the end. It will make you furious, and it should. Please like and subscribe for more short summaries.